Alex wasn't just a billionaire. He was a man loved by women. But he hated love. At 30, he was a man with medium brown skin and a presence that made people pause the moment he entered a room. Women flocked to him, intoxicated by his sharp jawline, deep-set eyes, and the quiet power he carried like a tailored suit. Men respected him or envied him, or both. But Alex didn't care. He went through women the way he went through suits, luxurious, expensive, and discarded after a few weeks. He never stayed with one woman longer than 3 months. It was an unspoken rule, as fixed as the skyline view from his penthouse in the clouds. "I don't commit. I don't want a wife or kids," he told the last woman, who dared to let her feelings show. They were in the lounge of his penthouse, city lights glittering beyond the glass walls. "All I have to offer you is this." He flicked his hand downward in a careless gesture, eyes locked on hers, and cash. "Take it or leave it." For a moment, the woman's eyes glistened with hurt, but then her gaze hardened, and she stepped closer. Silent, she slipped her fingers to the buttons of her blouse and began to undress him. "That's what I thought," Alex murmured, his voice a low, satisfied growl. He leaned back in his leather armchair, watching as the woman's dress pulled around her feet like silk water. To him, this was the perfect arrangement. No strings, no expectations, just pleasure and the quiet hush of dollar bills smoothing over the aftermath. He had built walls as high as his skyscrapers, convinced that love was a weakness, a distraction, a liability, and he intended to keep it that way. At least that was the plan. Meanwhile, across the city, Eliana sat in the harsh white glow of a hospital room, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Her 5-year-old daughter, Malia, lay curled beneath crisp sheets, her small body frail, a tiny oxygen cannula resting beneath her nose. Machines hummed and beeped quietly around them, each sound a reminder of time slipping away. Eliana leaned over and kissed her daughter's forehead, lingering there for a moment, as if willing her own strength into the child's fragile body. Then she stood and gave the nurse a silent nod, gathering her worn denim jacket from the chair. "I'll be back soon, baby," she whispered, brushing a stray lock of hair from Malia's cheek. As she stepped into the corridor, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, illuminating the lines of worry etched into her face. She was 27, beautiful despite the shadows beneath. Her eyes with smooth brown skin and long black hair tied into a simple ponytail. She checked the time on her phone. Late again. She had to get to her second job, a graveyard shift at a convenience store in a gas station across town. Out in the cool night air, Eliana pulled her jacket tighter around herself. "I'm doing everything I can to get you that kidney transplant," she whispered into the darkness, her voice trembling. She forced herself forward, one step at a time. The night passed in a blur of customers and fluorescent lights. Before Eliana realized it, the clock crept toward 11 p.m. She wiped down the counter, fatigue aching in her bones, and moved to flip the sign on the door to closed. Just then, headlights swept across the glass, and a sleek black car purred to a stop outside. The engine barely made a sound as it idled. A young woman stepped out, tall and stylish, her hair cascading in dark waves over a tight red dress. She pushed the door open, the little bell jingling above her. "Can I get something real quick?" the woman asked breathlessly. "Sure," Eliana replied, stepping back to let her in. The woman strolled straight to one of the shelves and pointed. "2 packs of those." Eliana followed her gaze and blinked. "Condoms." She reached for the boxes without a word and placed them on the counter. That'll be $12.79, Eliana said. The woman handed over a black credit card, the name embossed in gleaming silver letters. Alex Peterson. Eliana hesitated, frowning. This isn't your card. The woman's eyes darted away. He didn't want to come in himself. I'll need some ID, Eliana insisted. The woman let out an impatient sigh, hurried back to the car, and returned moments later with a driver's license. Eliana held it up under the light, studying the photo of a handsome black man with medium brown skin, strong features, and the name Alex Peterson printed below. Okay, fine, Eliana murmured. She rang up the purchase and slid the card through the machine. Transaction approved. The woman snatched up the small bag and rushed out the door without another word. Eliana locked up behind her and finally stepped out into the cool night. Her apartment was only a few blocks away. As she walked, the streets of her neighborhood buzzed with life despite the late hour. Music thumped from open windows. Laughter echoed through narrow alleys. Kids played under flickering street lights, and old men sat on stoops arguing about politics or dominoes. Living in the ghetto meant everybody knew everybody for better or worse. And tonight it felt like the whole world kept spinning while Eliana's own life remained trapped in a slow, desperate grind. She reached her building and climbed the creaky stairs to her small apartment, her mind already drifting back to Malia's pale face under the harsh glow of hospital lights. Meanwhile, Alex was stretched out on a king-sized bed in a lavish suite at one of the city's most exquisite hotels. After a few too many close calls and clingy women trying to stake a claim in his penthouse, he'd made a new rule. No more bringing women into my personal space. Now there was always a hotel room booked under his name, complete with champagne chilling in a silver bucket and city views sprawling beneath floor-to-ceiling windows. Simone, the same young woman who dashed into Eliana's store that night, sat curled up on a velvet couch beside him. Her legs were tucked beneath her, her phone casting a glow over her pretty features as she scrolled and giggled at something unseen. Alex lounged with a glass of deep red wine, one arm slung over the back of the couch. He barely listened as Simone chattered about parties and influencers, his mind already moving to the next deal, the next acquisition, the next distraction. It was just another night for him. The next morning, Eliana was up before dawn, eyes gritty with fatigue. She dressed quietly, careful not to wake her neighbors through the paper-thin apartment walls, then slipped out into the cool gray of early morning. Her second job awaited her at a sprawling food court directly across from the gleaming towers of Peterson Global Telecommunications Groups and Companies, the empire Alex owned. But Eliana didn't work inside the shining building. She was a groundskeeper. With a broom in one hand and a dustpan in the other, she swept discarded cups, cigarette butts, and plastic wrappers from the tiled courtyard. Nearby, her coworker Sarah mopped the floors and wiped down the food court tables, her rubber gloves snapping as she scrubbed sticky spills. Together, they worked in silence, moving from one corner of the plaza to the next. Eliana's breath puffed into the cool morning air as she heaved another trash bag into a bin. Above them, the mirrored windows of Peterson Global glistened under the rising sun, a tower of glass and steel that seemed to belong to another universe. A universe Eliana was certain she'd never touch. Weeks passed, and Eliana's routine remained relentless. Her life was set like clockwork. Food court from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., hospital visits from 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m., convenience store from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Most days she trudged home with her muscles aching and her eyelids heavy as lead. The kidney transplant for Malia would cost $800,000. Eliana had managed to save barely $100,000 through endless shifts and quiet sacrifices. It felt like trying to fill an ocean with a teaspoon. That night, she sat alone in her tiny bedroom, clutching a pillow to her chest. Hot tears spilled down her cheeks, soaking the fabric as she rocked back and forth. "I don't want my baby to die," she whispered into the darkness. Her voice cracked under the weight of her fear. "Please don't take her from me." Outside her window, the neon lights of the city blinked coldly, indifferent to her prayers. Meanwhile, high above the streets, in a glass tower that bore his name, Alex Peterson sat in his sleek office, a half-empty glass of whiskey resting on the polished mahogany desk. He stared at a framed photograph beside his laptop, a younger version of himself perched on his mother's lap, her arms wrapped lovingly around him. She died when Alex was just 6 years old, leaving him alone with a father who buried himself in work to drown his grief. His father had passed away 2 years ago, and Alex hadn't shed a single tear at the funeral. He had no siblings, no cousins he was close to. The only constant companion in his life was solitude and money. Always like this. His gaze dropped to another photo tucked away in a drawer, a picture he could never bring himself to throw away. In it, he stood beside Selena, the woman he'd once believed he would marry. She cheated on him with his best friend. Since then, Alex had carved a rule into his soul as ruthlessly as he carved profits from his business deals. Women cannot be trusted. He set the photo face down and leaned back in his chair, voice a low murmur in the silent office. "Women are just for fun, Mom. Nothing more." Outside the window, the city sparkled like diamonds scattered across velvet, and Alex sat alone among his millions, convinced that was the only safe way to live. Days later, Alex found himself walking into the food court of the towering complex that housed Peterson Global Telecommunications groups and companies. It was something he rarely did. Usually, he stayed tucked away in his private elevator, his own chefs, and the executive dining suite on the top floor. But that morning, a sudden craving for real coffee and perhaps a spark of restless curiosity had drawn him down among the people he barely acknowledged existed. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows, glinting off polished tiles and stainless steel counters. The scent of brewed coffee and frying dough hung warm and rich in the air. Across the food court, Eliana and Sarah stood leaning on their brooms, pausing in a rare moment of quiet. "Life is so unfair," Eliana murmured after a long silence, her eyes distant. "My daughter needs a kidney, and some people out there have more money than they could ever spend in 10 lifetimes." Sarah sighed, her expression soft with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Eliana. I don't know how you manage 2 jobs and still keep going." She paused, shaking her head. "It's just not right." Before Eliana could answer, Sarah's eyes widened like saucers. She sucked in a sharp breath, her hand shooting out to clutch Eliana's arm. "Oh my gosh," Sarah whispered urgently, her gaze locked across the food court. "Eliana, look." "What?" Eliana frowned, turning to follow her friend's stare. Sarah's voice dropped to a reverent hush. "That's Alex Peterson." Eliana blinked, utterly confused. "Who's that?" Sarah looked at her like she'd just confessed she'd never heard of electricity. "Eliana? Alex Peterson? The billionaire? He owns this whole company. The one with the penthouse in the clouds, the sports cars, the fashion shows, everything." Her voice trembled with excitement. "The man's simply breathtaking. His body is like a dream walking around in skin. Eliana's eyes flicked back across the food court. Alex stood at the counter of a specialty coffee stall, his presence magnetic even from a distance. His athletic frame filled out a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, the fine fabric hugging the sharp planes of his shoulders and chest. Under the crisp white shirt, lean muscles shifted with every subtle movement. Dark eyes surveyed the menu board with cool detachment, unaware of the way conversations halted around him, how women blushed and men unconsciously straightened their postures. Eliana tilted her head, studying him. "He just looks like a man in a suit," she said finally. Sarah gave a strangled gasp. "Girl, no, he's not just a man in a suit. That's Alex freaking Peterson." But Eliana only shrugged, her mind already drifting back to hospital bills, medication lists, and her daughter's pale face. Eliana couldn't tear her eyes away from Sarah's starstruck expression. "Can you ask him for a loan for me?" Eliana said. But Sarah wasn't listening. She was too busy drooling over Alex, her gaze glued to the man standing across the food court. "Sarah," Eliana called, trying to get her attention. No response. "Sarah," she called again, sharper this time, grabbing her friend's arm and giving her a gentle shake. Sarah blinked, snapping out of her daze. "I need a problem so I can ask him for a loan," Sarah murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "Wait, what? He gives loans?" Eliana asked, frowning. "Yes," Sarah said, staring again toward Alex. "How does it work?" Eliana asked. "Call his assistant," Sarah said. "So, how do I get the number?" Eliana asked. "It's in the manager's office," Sarah said, still looking at Alex, who now had his phone pressed to his ear. "I would love to be the boss's wife," Sarah said drily. "He is not our boss, Sarah." "And would you stop drooling?" Eliana said. "He is our boss. He owns this food court. How long have you been working here again?" Sarah said. "A little over a year." Eliana replied. "And you didn't know he was our boss?" Sarah asked incredulously. "It's first time I'm seeing him here," Eliana said. "Well, he doesn't come here often," Sarah said finally. Just then, a sharp voice cut through the air, snapping both women to attention. "Don't you two have any work to do?" They jumped, whirling around to see Miss Cynthia glaring at them from across the food court, arms folded over her chest, one foot tapping impatiently. Sarah and Eliana exchanged a look, then skewered off in opposite directions, grabbing their brooms as Miss Cynthia's eyes followed them like twin laser beams. That evening, before Eliana left work, she slipped quietly into the manager's office while Miss Cynthia was busy counting the day's receipts. Her fingers trembled slightly as she flipped through the small Rolodex on the desk, searching each card until she found the number labeled Alex Peterson, personal assistant. She scribbled it down on a scrap of receipt paper, then hurried out before anyone noticed. In the locker room, the fluorescent light buzzed softly overhead as Eliana sat on the wooden bench, her hands shaking. She stared at the number for a long moment, her thumb hovering over the keypad on her battered old phone. Finally, she drew in a shaky breath and dialed. After a few rings, a soft, professional voice answered the call. "Hi, this is Eliana Dawson." "Yes, Miss Dawson. How can I help you?" the woman asked politely. "I need a loan, and I was told to contact you," Eliana said, her breath quivering. "Okay," the woman said calmly. After a moment, she said, "Your appointment date is 2 days from now, for p.m. sharp." The woman finished, her tone brisk, but kind. "Thank you," Eliana said, her voice small but filled with cautious hope. She hung up, clutching the phone to her chest, her mind racing. 2 days, that's all I have to wait. Maybe, maybe this is the break I've been praying for. She closed her locker, wiped her eyes, and headed out into the night, the city lights glimmering above her like distant stars. Eliana hurried to the hospital as the last glow of sunset faded from the sky. She didn't have a shift at the convenience store tonight, which meant for once she'd be able to spend more time with her daughter. Her steps quickened down the familiar hospital corridors, the smell of antiseptic sharp in the air. Just as Eliana walked into the room, she was greeted with a joyful cry. "Mommy!" Malia squealed. Eliana dropped her bag and rushed forward, scooping her daughter into a gentle hug. She kissed the top of Malia's head, breathing in the scent of baby shampoo and hospital sheets. "How is my baby doing?" Eliana asked, settling into the chair beside Malia's bed. Malia beamed up at her, her tiny face pale, but eyes sparkling with love. For a few precious moments, Eliana forgot about hospital bills and double shifts. She held Malia's small hand and listened as her daughter talked about cartoons, nurses, and the colorful stickers she'd collected that day. Meanwhile, high above the city in his sleek office, Alex was poring over a stack of paperwork and financial projections. The glow from his laptop screen reflected in his dark eyes as he reviewed figures and contracts he'd have to finalize the next day. After hours of work, he finally pushed back from his desk and rolled his shoulders. "I'm leaving," he said curtly to his assistant, who looked up in surprise as he strolled fast. Alex stepped into the private elevator, the mirror doors sliding closed behind him. As he walked through the grand lobby of Peterson Global, the quiet hush of night was broken by a ripple of gasps and murmurs. Heads turned, eyes widened, and phones lifted discreetly to snap photos. Alex smirked, not breaking his stride. "By the time I'm done with this world," he thought as he slipped his sunglasses on, "this entire city of women will be my exes." A faint smile tugged at his lips as he reached his sleek black car waiting at the curb. His driver opened the door, and Alex settled into the plush leather seat as the engine purred to life, carrying him into the night. The next day, Eliana went to work with a spark of hope burning quietly in her chest. For the first time in weeks, her steps felt lighter, her eyes a little brighter. Sarah noticed immediately as they wiped down tables together under the bright lights of the food court. "Girl, did your daughter got the kidney transplant?" Sarah asked, peering at her friend with cautious excitement. "No, but a meeting with Alex Peterson tomorrow to ask for that loan," Eliana said, unable to keep the flicker of hope from her voice. "I hope you can handle it," Sarah said slowly. "What do you mean?" Eliana asked, her brows knitting in confusion. "Well," Sarah paused, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "He doesn't give you a choice in how you pay him back. He decides everything. He will tell you what he wants for the money. It can be anything." "How do you know all this?" Eliana asked, a chill running down her spine. "Girl, I've been working here for 5 years. I hear things," Sarah said firmly. "Well, I'm still going to try my luck," Eliana said, folding her arms across her chest, determination shining in her eyes. "I'm not telling you not to, and be prepared," Sarah said. Eliana inhaled a shaky breath, trying to steady the pounding of her heart. That night, after her shift at the convenience store, Eliana lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The hum of distant traffic drifted through her open window, mingling with the low buzz of a neon sign outside. But all she could hear was Sarah's voice echoing in her mind. "He decides everything. It can be anything." Eliana hugged her pillow tight, her thoughts spinning between hope and dread. I don't care what it takes, she thought fiercely, blinking away the tears gathering in her eyes. I have to save Malia, no matter what. But as the shadows deepened around her small bedroom, fear crawled along her skin. Because in the depths of her heart, Eliana knew tomorrow could change her life forever. The sun hadn't yet climbed fully over the rooftops when Eliana woke the next morning, the pale gray light filtering through her thin curtains. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes, her body weary from months of endless work. But today felt different. Her chest was tight, breath catching in her throat. Today was the day. She moved quietly around her tiny apartment, careful not to wake the neighbors. She showered, tied her long black hair into a sleek ponytail, and chose her best outfit, a simple navy blouse and black slacks that were slightly faded from too many washes. She dabbed a little makeup under her eyes, trying to cover the deep circles of exhaustion. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back, hopeful yet afraid. Please let this work. Downstairs, the street buzzed with life as usual. Vendors set up carts selling roasted peanuts and patties. Car horns blared. Children chased each other along the sidewalks, laughter echoing off brick walls. Eliana stopped at the corner bakery and bought a small cup of coffee, her hands trembling so much she nearly spilled it. She could barely taste the drink as she sipped, her mind spinning with the conversation from yesterday. He doesn't give you a choice in how you pay him back. He decides everything. It can be anything. She tried to push the fear aside. I can handle whatever he wants, she told herself. All that matters is Malia. When she arrived at the food court, Sarah was already there sweeping the entrance tiles. She shot Eliana a searching look. Girl, you okay? Sarah asked softly. Eliana nodded, though her voice wavered. I'm fine. I'm just nervous. Sarah lowered her broom and stepped closer. You don't have to do this if it doesn't feel right. I have to, Eliana said firmly. She's my baby. I can't watch her die. Sarah sighed, looking ready to say more. But Miss Cynthia appeared suddenly, barking orders about trash bins and greasy floors. Eliana spent the rest of her shift on autopilot. She swept, she scrubbed, she wiped down tables, but every few minutes she glanced toward the towering glass building across the street, Peterson Global Telecommunications Groups and Companies, where Alex Peterson was waiting. By the time the clock struck 3:30, Eliana's palms were slick with sweat. She slipped into the locker room, changed into fresh clothes, and gathered her courage. Her heart thudded wildly in her chest as she whispered to herself, "This is for Malia, no matter what it takes." Alex started his day as he always did, early, precise, and utterly in control. He rose at 5:30 sharp, pushing the silk sheets aside and stepping barefoot onto heated marble floors. A quick shower under the rain-style fixture cleared the last fog of sleep from his mind. Then he dressed, a crisp white button-down shirt, tailored charcoal slacks, and an elegant watch gleaming on his wrist. He moved through his penthouse, glass walls offering panoramic views of a city he owned piece by piece. Coffee waited in the kitchen, prepared exactly the way he liked it. He sipped it slowly, eyes scanning a digital screen mounted on the wall, flipping through news reports and financial updates. Profits up, competitors slipping, another acquisition on the table. He should have been satisfied. But as he stared out over the glittering skyline, the same emptiness pressed in. On his ribs. Women are just for fun, he reminded himself. Nothing more. By 8:30, Alex was gliding through the revolving doors of Peterson Global. As always, the lobby seemed to hush when he arrived. Suits paused mid-conversation. Assistants scurried out of his path. Photographers tried to catch him on their cameras, but his security team was quick and efficient. He swept past the reception desks without acknowledging anyone, rode the private elevator, and entered his office, the glass fortress at the top of the tower. For the next several hours, Alex was buried in work. He met with lawyers about mergers, signed off on marketing budgets, reviewed figures for a new fiber optic network in South America. His assistant, a slim woman in a sleek navy dress, hovered by the door, ready with coffee refills and schedules. At one point, she cleared her throat gently. "Mr. Peterson, you have an appointment today at 4 p.m. with a Miss Eliana Dawson." Alex lifted an eyebrow, flipping through his digital calendar. "Who's that? She called 2 days ago asking for a loan. I scheduled her, as you instructed, for initial requests to go through you directly before moving to legal." Alex leaned back in his chair, curiosity flickering in his dark eyes. "Eliana Dawson," he murmured, testing the name on his tongue. "Never heard of her." His assistant hesitated. "She works in the food court across the street." Alex gave a dismissive flick of his fingers. "Well, let's see what she wants." He returned to his spreadsheets, mind already moving on, but a part of him, a small part, wondered who this woman was who dared ask Alex Peterson for help. At precisely 3:55, he rose from his desk, smoothed his suit jacket, and checked his reflection in the darkened glass. He wasn't nervous. Alex Peterson never was. But as he strode toward the small conference room where Eliana Dawson would soon be waiting, something in his chest gave an unexpected tiny twist. Eliana stood outside the gleaming glass tower of Peterson Global Telecommunications, clutching her small purse so tightly her knuckles were white. The building seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky, its mirrored windows catching the afternoon sun and throwing shards of light across the busy street. People in expensive suits moved in and out of the revolving doors, their conversations crisp and hurried, their heels clicking on polished marble. She had never felt so out of place in her life. She drew in a deep breath, trying to steady the shaking in her chest. "You're doing this for Malia." Carefully, she crossed the street and stepped through the towering glass doors. Inside, cool air rushed over her skin, scented faintly with expensive cologne and furniture polish. The lobby was vast and silent, except for the soft murmur of voices and the occasional ding of an elevator. An enormous chandelier glittered overhead. People moved around her briskly, carrying briefcases, tapping on phones, or speaking into discreet earpieces. Eliana paused near the reception desk, feeling small and invisible among the polished executives. A young woman in a sleek navy suit approached her with a polite, professional smile. "Can I help you, miss?" Eliana swallowed, summoning her courage. I have an appointment with Mr. Alex Peterson. My name is Eliana Dawson." The woman's smile never wavered. She tapped quickly on her tablet, then nodded. "Yes, Miss Dawson. Please follow me." Eliana followed her through the lobby, her sneakers squeaking slightly on the marble floors. She caught glimpses of artwork in gilded frames, silent security guards, and offices with glass walls where men and women in business attire held intense discussions. Her heart pounded harder with every step. They stopped before a set of dark wooden doors. "He'll be with you shortly. Please have a seat," the assistant said, gesturing toward a row of sleek leather chairs lining the corridor. Eliana sank into one, clutching the straps of her purse so tightly they dug into her palms. Stay calm. Just ask for the money. It's for Malia. Nothing else matters. Asterisk. A few minutes ticked by, each second stretching like an hour. She forced herself to breathe, but her stomach twisted tighter and tighter. Then she heard footsteps approaching, measured, confident, unmistakable. She looked up and saw Alex Peterson striding down the hallway toward her, his presence so powerful it seemed to ripple through the air. He paused in front of her, dark eyes cool and assessing. "Eliana Dawson?" he asked. Eliana tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. "Why, yes, sir. I am Eliana," she stammered, her voice trembling as she stared up at him. "Let's go," he said coolly, gesturing for her to follow him into a nearby conference room. Eliana trailed behind him, feeling like she was floating outside her own body. The room was sleek and modern, glass walls and chrome accents, a long table stretching between them. They sat. Eliana's eyes darted nervously around the room, unable to settle anywhere for long. "So, how may I help you, Miss Dawson?" he asked, looking straight into her eyes, his tone unreadable. "I need a loan," she said, swallowing hard. "How much?" he asked without missing a beat. 11 million. "I need it for," Eliana began, but he held up a hand, cutting her off. "I don't need to know what you need it for," he said sharply. "That's not my business." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a checkbook, flipping it open with practiced ease. "This is what will happen," he continued, his eyes raking slowly over her. "I will give you 5 million. That's your price for 1 week in my bed. Take it or leave it." Eliana's breath caught. "You want me to sleep with you?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I like having fun with women," he said, leaning back in his chair, studying her reactions. "And the fact that you work at the food court means you don't make that much to pay me back. So, as payment, I want to be inside you every night for 1 week." Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. "Will I be able to go anywhere?" she asked, thinking immediately of her daughter. "If you wish, but no work for that week." A single tear slid down Eliana's cheek as her mind raced with Malia's fragile face in a hospital bed. After a beat, "Okay, I accept," Eliana said, voice shaking but firm. Alex smirked, his lips curling faintly. "Great." He pulled out his phone and dialed swiftly. When the line connected, he spoke without emotion. "Please remove Eliana Dawson from the schedule for the next 10 days. He ended the call and tucked the phone back into his jacket pocket. "But you said 1 week," Eliana whispered. "I know. Thought you might need a few days after to rest," he said, his voice low and smooth. He reached over and pulled open a sleek drawer. From it, he took out a stack of papers clipped together neatly. "This is a non-disclosure agreement. You can tell no one about this arrangement. Read and sign," he said, pushing the contract across the table to her. Eliana stared at the thick document. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages, scanning the legal language. She swallowed the lump in her throat, picked up the pen, and signed. She pushed the signed contract back to him and stood, her knees feeling like water. "There's more," he said, stopping her before she could turn away. "Someone will pick you up tomorrow and take you to my penthouse. Don't bring anything." He stood and walked to the door, opening it for her with a calm, practiced elegance. "I'll see you tomorrow, Miss Dawson," he said, handing her a check. She glanced down and saw the number, $2,000,000, and her breath caught in her throat. "Yes, sir," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Then she turned and walked out, the check clutched tightly in her shaking hand, her entire world tilted on its axis. Eliana stepped out of the towering glass building into the late afternoon sun, the city bustling and alive all around her. But to her it felt as if everything had gone silent. She moved through the crowds like a ghost, clutching the check so tightly it crumpled in her fist. The paper felt impossibly light for what it now represented, a price tag on her body, her dignity, and maybe, just maybe, her daughter's life. Her mind spun with Alex's words. "I want to be inside you every night for 1 week." She felt sick. Her stomach twisted so hard she thought she might vomit right there on the sidewalk, but she forced herself to keep walking, her breath shaky as she made her way toward the hospital. By early evening, Eliana was sitting beside Malia's hospital bed. She smoothed her daughter's curly hair back from her forehead, pressing gentle kisses against her warm skin. Malia was awake, her big brown eyes glowing as she clutched a stuffed bunny with one hand. "Mommy, why are you sad?" Malia asked in a small, curious voice. Eliana blinked rapidly, trying to clear the tears threatening to spill. She forced a smile and cupped her daughter's cheek. "I'm not sad, baby. I'm just tired." Malia studied her mother's face for a moment, then snuggled closer. "I love you, Mommy. I love you too, my sweet girl, more than anything in this world." As the machines beeped gently around them, Eliana sat there staring down at Malia's small, fragile body. "I'll do anything for you," she thought desperately. Even this. She felt the weight of the check in her purse, a promise of hope and a shackle all at once. Tomorrow, her life would change forever. But tonight, she let herself hold her daughter close, inhaling the soft scent of baby shampoo and hospital antiseptic, pretending for just a few hours that everything was still okay. Meanwhile, across town, Alex sat in the plush leather booth of an upscale sports bar, neon lights flashing against the polished wood and the low hum of conversation buzzing around them. He leaned back casually, nursing a glass of top-shelf bourbon, as he glanced at the big screens overhead where a basketball game played. Beside him sat Michael, his oldest friend, a tall, athletic man with a close-cropped fade and warm brown skin. Michael looked tired, his eyes shadowed despite the upbeat crowd around them. "So, what you been up to?" Alex asked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Same old, same," Michael replied with a sigh. Alex studied him for a moment, picking up on the tension in his voice. "Can you help a brother out, man?" Michael asked suddenly. "With what?" Alex asked, raising an eyebrow, the corners of his mouth twitching with curiosity. "I need investment. 10 million, Michael said, leaning forward, his voice low. He looked weary, as though he'd carried this burden for too long. "Is that it?" Alex asked, his tone surprisingly light. "Yeah, man." "Okay, no problem." Michael blinked, stunned. "Really, man?" Alex smirked faintly and clapped his friend on the back. "You're like my brother, man." Relief washed over Michael's face, and for a moment, his tension seemed to melt away. "Thanks, bro. You don't know what this means." That night, after leaving the bar, Alex stood alone in his penthouse, high above the city. He gazed out through the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights twinkle like a blanket of stars sprawled across the earth. The glass of bourbon hung loosely in his fingers as he took in the view. Deals, power, money, it was all his. Yet, even with the city at his feet, an emptiness lingered in the shadows of his vast, silent home. 1 week, he thought, his mind drifting to Eliana. "Let's see how long you last." He turned away from the glass, finishing his drink in a single swallow. The next morning, Eliana woke before dawn, her eyes gritty but sharp with purpose. Today was the day. She slipped quietly out of bed, dressed quickly, and tucked the precious check into her purse. As the sun began to rise, she made her way to the bank and stood in line with her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. When it was finally her turn, she slid the check across the counter, her fingers trembling. "I'd like to deposit this," she said softly. The teller's eyes widened at the amount. She nodded professionally, but said, "The funds will be available in 2 business days, Miss Dawson." "Thank you," Eliana whispered, exhaling a shaky breath as she stepped away. 2 more days, she thought, clutching the deposit slip. Just 2 more days. From the bank, she rushed straight to the hospital. She spent an hour at Malia's side, soaking in every precious minute. She held her daughter's tiny hand, combed her curls, and told her silly stories to make her laugh. Malia was in good spirits that morning, clutching her stuffed bunny and asking when she could come home. "Soon, baby," Eliana said, her throat tight as she forced a smile. "Mommy's working on it." At about 11:30 a.m., Eliana was back at her apartment building, pacing the narrow hallway. Her stomach was in knots. Outside, a sleek black car rolled to a stop by the curb. Its glossy paint reflected the sunlight like a dark pool of oil. Curtains twitched in the windows all along the block as neighbors peered out, whispering and pointing. People on the street froze, curiosity written all over their faces. Eliana swallowed her fear, squared her shoulders, and stepped outside. She didn't have much with her, just her purse and the clothes on her back. That was all Alex told her to bring. The rear passenger door opened silently, and a man in a sharp suit gestured her inside. She climbed in, settling into the cool leather seat as the door closed gently behind her. Meanwhile, across the city, Alex stood inside an upscale boutique, his arms folded as he surveyed racks of designer clothing. Kiera, his trusted stylist, a petite woman with caramel skin and impeccable fashion sense, held up one silk dress after another, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "So who's the woman?" Kiera asked, arching an eyebrow as she held a deep emerald gown against a mannequin. "Just pick out what you think will look good on her," Alex said curtly, his gaze distant. Okay, Kiera laughed, holding up her hands in mock surrender. "But she's about to look like a queen." Alex's lips curved faintly as he watched Kiera pile dresses, heels, lingerie, and accessories into shopping bags. "Make sure there's everything she might need," he said. "Sizes, colors. Figure it out. Trust me," Kiera said, winking. "She's going to be unforgettable." Outside, the black car carrying Eliana pulled away from her neighborhood, the world she knew fading in the rearview mirror. Eliana sat in the back of the sleek black car, hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles ached. The city rolled past her window in a blur, graffiti-covered brick walls giving way to shining glass towers, potholes smoothing into perfect black asphalt. She barely noticed any of it. Her mind spun with questions and fear. Asterisk, what will he expect of me? Will I really be able to go back to my old life after this? Asterisk, but over and over, Malia's face flashed in her thoughts. Her small, brave smile, the soft weight of her hand in Eliana's own. "I'm doing this for you, baby." After nearly 30 minutes, the car slowed and pulled into a private underground entrance beneath a towering skyscraper. A valet stepped forward, opening Eliana's door. "Miss Dawson, please come with me," said the suited man who'd ridden silently beside her the entire trip. She followed him through a gleaming corridor lined with modern art and softly glowing lights, the marble floors so polished they reflected every step. An elevator awaited them at the end of the hallway. The man pressed a small panel, and the doors slid open silently. Inside, they rode upward in silence, higher and higher until Eliana's ears popped. When the doors finally opened, she stepped out into another world. The penthouse was vast and bathed in natural light pouring through towering glass walls. White marble floors gleamed beneath her feet. Plush modern furniture in shades of cream and silver filled the open living space. Huge windows offered a sweeping view of the entire city sprawled below like a glittering map. Eliana felt as if she'd stepped onto the set of a movie. A woman with caramel skin and stylish curls approached her, a bright smile lighting her face. She wore a chic jumpsuit and carried several glossy shopping bags. "Hi, you must be Eliana. I'm Kiera, Alex's stylist." "Hi," Eliana stammered, glancing nervously around the sprawling room. Kiera beamed. "We've got lots to do. Come on, I've got outfits, shoes, lingerie, accessories, everything. Alex wants you looking perfect." As Kiera led her toward a nearby hallway, Eliana cast one last glance over her shoulder at the penthouse's main room, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the endless skyline. Somewhere in this vast space, Alex Peterson was waiting for her. Kiera led Eliana down a long, sleek hallway to a private suite off the main penthouse. The room was enormous, a dressing chamber lined with mirrored wardrobes, soft lighting casting a gentle glow across racks of designer clothes. Boxes of shoes and jewelry were stacked neatly on glass shelves, each item gleaming as if they'd never been touched. Eliana stood in the doorway, wide-eyed, clutching the strap of her purse. "Girl, relax. You're about to look like $1,000,000. I don't need all this," Eliana whispered. Kiera waved her off. "Honey, when you're rolling with Alex Peterson, you need all this." Over the next hour, Kiera worked like a whirlwind. First, she had Eliana try on a series of designer dresses in luxurious fabrics, silk, satin, chiffon, each one fitting her curves perfectly. "Turn," Kiera ordered gently as she zipped up an emerald green gown. "Ooh, yes, that color on your skin. Magic." Eliana stared at herself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman reflected there. Her hair was styled in soft waves that framed her face, her makeup subtle yet elegant, highlighting her warm brown eyes and full lips. Kiera added a delicate diamond necklace that shimmered under the lights. "There," she said, stepping back with a satisfied nod. "Now you look like you belong in this penthouse." Eliana swallowed hard. "I don't know if I can do this." Kiera squeezed her hand. "Just remember why you're here, okay? And don't let him see you scared. Alex respects strength." Eliana drew in a trembling breath and nodded. Moments later, Kiera escorted Eliana back to the main living area where Alex was standing by the windows, hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out over the city. He wore a tailored black suit today, the fabric hugging the lean strength of his shoulders. Sunlight caught in the sharp lines of his jaw as he turned slowly to look at her. His dark eyes swept over Eliana from head to toe. A faint, unreadable smile curved his lips. "You clean up nicely, Miss Dawson." Eliana shifted under his intense stare. "Thank you, sir." Alex stepped closer, close enough that she caught the subtle scent of his cologne, a dark, expensive fragrance that made her pulse stutter. He lifted a hand and lightly brushed his fingers against the diamond pendant at her throat. "This suits you," he murmured, "but I prefer you without it, and without everything else you're wearing." Eliana sucked in a sharp breath, color flooding her cheeks. Alex tilted his head, studying her reaction, his voice soft but firm. "I want you comfortable, Eliana, but I also want you to remember our arrangement." I I remember," she whispered. He held her gaze a moment longer, then stepped back, his expression shifting to one of cool command. "Tonight you'll have dinner with me here. Kiera will help you change again." After dinner, his eyes darkened, the promise in them unmistakable. "We'll begin the rest of our agreement." Eliana felt her knees wobble as Alex turned and strode back toward his office, leaving her standing in the middle of the lavish penthouse. Kiera came up beside her, touching her arm gently. "Come on," she said softly. "Let's get you ready for dinner." Hours later, the sun had set, and the penthouse glowed with warm pools of light. The city sparkled beyond the glass walls, a blanket of diamonds under the velvet night sky. A long dining table was set near the windows, crystal glasses and fine china gleaming under the soft chandelier. Alex and Eliana sat across from each other. Kiera was long gone. The silence between them stretched as servers moved silently in and out, placing silver-domed platters on the table and pouring delicate streams of red wine into crystal goblets. Alex cut into his steak with slow, precise movements. His dark eyes remained fixed on Eliana, as if she were the only thing in the room. Eliana fidgeted with her napkin, feeling the weight of his gaze. She stared down at her untouched plate, a delicate fillet of fish surrounded by tiny, colorful vegetables. "Eat," Alex said quietly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Eliana picked up her fork with trembling fingers, forcing herself to take a small bite. Alex leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You're afraid," he said bluntly. Eliana swallowed hard. "Wouldn't you be?" she whispered. He considered that for a moment, then gave a small shrug. "Fear is useful. It keeps you sharp, but don't let it control you." They fell into silence again. Outside, car lights crawled like fireflies along the streets far below. Finally, Alex set down his glass and spoke, his voice softer now. "You did this for your daughter." Eliana blinked, startled. "How? How do you know?" "I didn't until just now." He tilted his head slightly. "You just told me." Eliana's face flushed as she realized what she'd revealed. Alex's expression remained unreadable. "I respect sacrifice, but remember, business is business. I'm giving you $5 million for 1 week. There are no half measures in my world." She lowered her eyes, nodding. "I understand." Alex rose slowly from his chair. "Dinner is over." He came around the table, stopping beside her. He extended his hand. Eliana stared at it, heart thudding in her chest. "Come with me," Alex said. "It's time to begin our arrangement." Eliana stared at Alex's outstretched hand, her breath caught in her throat. Every instinct in her screamed to run, but another voice, the desperate one echoing Malia's name, forced her trembling fingers to lift and slip into his. Alex's grip was firm but not cruel. He helped her to her feet and led her away from the dining table, his stride smooth and purposeful. They walked through the expansive penthouse, past glittering chandeliers and marble floors, until they reached a set of tall double doors. Alex pushed them open. The bedroom beyond was breathtaking, soft lamps spilling over a massive bed dressed in silvery gray sheets, plush rugs on dark hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the glowing city skyline. Alex released Eliana's hand and turned to face her. "Take off the dress," he said quietly. Eliana's eyes widened. Right now? Yes, right now. She swallowed, her throat dry as dust. Her hands hovered uncertainly at the zipper of her gown. Alex's gaze locked on hers. His voice softened, but held an edge. You agreed to this, Eliana. Don't make me remind you why you're here. Tears pricked at her eyes as she slowly turned and reached for the zipper. The silky fabric slid down her shoulders, pooling soundlessly at her feet. She stood there in delicate lace lingerie, arms crossing over her chest instinctively. Alex's eyes traveled over her, darkening. You're beautiful, he murmured, stepping closer. He lifted a hand and gently tilted her chin up so she was forced to meet his gaze. Asterisk, asterisk, I won't hurt you. But make no mistake, I intend to have you every way I want. Eliana's breath came in shallow gasps. Come, Alex said, backing toward the bed, drawing her with him. He sat on the edge of the mattress and pulled her gently between his knees. For a moment, he simply studied her face, unreadable. Then he pressed a soft kiss to her collarbone. Eliana's eyes fluttered closed, a shiver running through her. You belong to me this week, he whispered at her ear. For Malia, she reminded herself fiercely. Scene continues behind closed doors. Afterward, Alex stood at the window, the city lights casting a shimmering glow across his bare shoulders. For a few long moments, the only sound in the penthouse was the distant hum of traffic. Eliana lay on the bed, trying to steady her breath, skin still tingling where he'd touched her, feeling exposed and uncertain. Finally, Alex spoke, quiet but edged. Don't mistake what happened just now for anything other than what it is. I know. He turned slightly, eyes finding hers. You're here because of a deal, nothing else. I told you I wouldn't hurt you, and I won't. But I expect you to be available to me whenever I want you. No hesitation. Eliana nodded slowly. I understand. He exhaled and raked a hand through his hair. Go take a shower. Kiera left you some things in the bathroom. Put on whatever you're comfortable in and get some rest. He turned back to the window, dismissing her without another glance. Eliana rose on trembling legs, gathered the silk sheet around herself, and moved toward the bathroom. At the doorway she paused, glancing back at Alex's silhouette against the night. A swirl of fear and exhaustion, and a tiny spark of something she wouldn't name, turned in her chest. Just 1 week, she whispered as she closed the bathroom door softly behind her. I can survive 1 week. To be continued.